for joining me for One Mallet in Front of the Other. Before we dig in, I'd like to thank the Wexner Center for giving me and other artists this platform to share our work, our processes, and some of our thoughts during this unprecedented time of global pandemic and protest. So when all this first began, I felt this sort of constant pull between my own sort of natural introvert tendencies and thinking, wow, this is like some kind of amazing introvert utopia where I can go to arts events all over the world without having to leave my house. But at the same time, it was clearly not an introvert utopia because there's also a deadly global pandemic. And so I felt really pulled between that desire to make the most of this time and having the extra time as someone who is able to work from home and thinking of it as like this kind of artist retreat or feeling like I had to take advantage of it that way, but also knowing that there was so much uncertainty and fear and suffering in the world for that same reason. And so I guess I just felt really pulled between those. As an artist, I kind of initially found it a really difficult time to make art because I was experiencing that pull in so many different directions, right? Feeling the pressure that I had to be making art that was commenting on the times or making some kind of big, important statement on the times, and feeling like I had to do it really perfectly and say a lot. But also feeling that need to be taking care of my own mental health, physical health, emotional health during everything that was going on, and then balancing that against doing as much as I can to support the people who are on the front lines of this, right? So the essential workers, the activists now who are protesting, and so all those different directions made it hard to feel like making art was important. Today what I want to talk about is how I get myself moving again when I'm feeling stuck or when I'm feeling overwhelmed or sort of incapacitated creatively by all the different forces that are happening in the world. And so if the things that I have to share today work for you, then that's great. If they don't, that's also fine. But I hope that I can at least throw some ideas out there that might help somebody to get themselves unstuck. So to start this off, I want to show you some of the videos that I was making, especially right at the very beginning of the stay-at-home order. So let's check those out. So those were 4 videos that I made at the very beginning of all of the stay-at-home order, and I used a free app called Acapella to make those, and I'll demonstrate and talk more about that app later. But I made those 4 videos using objects that I had been spending a lot of time with during quarantine. So a jigsaw puzzle, my houseplants, the third thing was an adjustable dumbbell that had been taken apart into all the separate weights. And then the So in addition to having that daily practice as part of my routine, the other piece of it that I found really helpful is having some limitations. So as a percussionist, space is really important to us. We need to have space where we can be loud. We need to have space where we can set up big instruments. We need to have access to those big instruments in the first place, because not everybody has a marimba and a vibraphone and a drum set and timpani at their home. Maybe they have one or two of those things, but it's hard to find the space for all of that. My artistic output also changes a lot depending on where I live or what my studio situation is like. So do I have a room where I can set up a drum set and play it without upsetting somebody? And if not, what do I have in my living space that I can play? What are things that I can play without making the people upstairs annoyed with me? And how can I continue to make music and be a percussionist even if I don't have a bunch of drums and percussion instruments around me at all times? Also, as a music teacher during all of this, I was simultaneously working on my own art and trying to figure out how to teach music, especially guitar and percussion classes that were suddenly online classes when a lot of my students didn't have instruments of their own at home. So, and I wanted to also do that in a way that would give the kids some tools that they could work with beyond just our class. I've done a lot of recording found objects before all of this, so I decided this would be a great time to pick that back up to demonstrate to my students how they could do similar kinds of things on their own, but also to give myself that challenge of doing it alongside of them so that I would have good advice, and also it's really fun. I also wanted to remind the kids that no matter what, no matter if they had access to a lot of instruments or didn't, they don't stop being musicians. They don't stop being artists. And so at times when artists are finding themselves bumping up against limitations, we as a group of people are really good at finding ways around that. But sometimes it just takes some practice. So throughout all of this, I was really fortunate to still have access to my studio space, but I decided to give myself some limitations when making these videos so that I could remove that excuse if I didn't feel like going to the studio. To also demonstrate to my students what they could do if they put their minds to it, and also because I really enjoy the way that limitations force me to be creative. So, for example, how could I make a whole piece of music out of just a jigsaw puzzle? What are all the different sounds that are possible with a puzzle that I might not have thought of otherwise if I had just gone to my studio and used a drum set? How many different sounds could I get from houseplants? I really like playing clay pots on their own, but I've never tried playing them with a plant inside. So I wanted to explore that a little bit. So even though the word limitations has a negative connotation, it can actually be a really useful creative tool that can help you expand your creativity, even if it's not in the directions that you were expecting. So about 6 years ago, I took a trip to the Pacific Northwest for 3 weeks. And this was at a time when I had just had two really close friends move out of town. And so I was going through this process where I was feeling really like scattered and grieving those losses, and also feeling pretty unsettled about my own sense of home and my sense of place. So I took this trip, and it gave me a chance to reconnect with some old friends and to just get out of town for a while and do a little bit of reflection. And so while I was there, I had taken like an old iPad with me, and I got super obsessed with making recordings on my iPad. So like my friends would go to bed, and then I would raid their kitchen cabinets for whatever kind of glassware things they had, or I would play with their kids' toys and make little recordings out of the different toys that they had laying around the house. Or I had a friend who had cut down a bunch of bamboo in his yard, and so I used all the bamboo sticks and played on different things that were in his yard. So I was just finding whatever I could around wherever I was traveling and making recordings with them. But the other thing that I was really enjoying doing was making recordings out in public places. So if I went to a cafe, there'd be the sound of like the barista knocking the espresso thing on the counter, or people clanking dishes together and things. So I would record those sounds too. But when I was out in public, I would want to mix them together and make these recordings kind of on the fly. So I would start to mix them, but in a public place, I didn't have my headphones with me all the time, and so I couldn't really hear what I was doing. Instead, I was mixing it based on the waveforms, so mixing it based on like where the loud parts and the soft parts were, how sustained it was, and really just based on what I could see and what I was guessing was happening. So I would try to line the recordings up in different ways or have them play off of each other. But as I was doing it, I didn't really know what I was getting. I didn't really know what it was going to sound like until I could listen later in a quiet place with some headphones. And so I got really obsessed with recording like that, where I would record things and not really be able to hear what I was doing, and just to kind of embrace that uncertainty and embrace the chaos of that was really fun. And it turned out to be this really therapeutic process for me of kind of leaning into that chaos and letting that guide my artistic process, and then having the process of creation be not so much about creating the ideas right from my head, but from sifting through the chaos that I found around me and pulling out what was good about it and arranging that chaos in ways that I could highlight the things I liked about it, or that the chaos would kind of show me what were the good things, and then I could highlight those and bring them out in the music myself. So ever since that trip, I've really kind of embraced this technique, I guess you could call it, in my own recordings, and trying to harness chaos, or even making that chaos from scratch, as a basis for composing. It's something that is really easy to do, especially at times when I'm feeling really scattered and I can't get my mental energy to focus on something long enough to have a coherent idea. Or sometimes if I'm just feeling really unmotivated or tired or drained, it's something that I can do really easily just by playing a bunch of sloppy notes and recording it, and then putting it together, and then later on coming back to it and letting the creative part of it be the sifting through it and putting it back together. And it kind of became this interesting way of playing Exquisite Corpse by myself with music. So I would do a lot of multitrack recording, which for those of you who don't know is where a musician will record something and then they can go back and listen to what they recorded before while they play something new that's going to layer on top of that. And again, typically you listen to what you already recorded so that you can fit all the parts together, but I would purposefully turn the volume down so that I couldn't hear what I had recorded before. And then I would play something else on top of it. And then after doing several layers of that, go back and listen to what I've done and see if there were any places where the layers connected in interesting ways, or if they played off of each other in interesting ways. And sometimes I would do that with a metronome on so I could hear a steady tempo, but not necessarily hear what I had played already before. And sometimes I would just do it straight up with no tempo at all, and not even really try to worry about what the rhythm was, but just kind of let it happen. So at those times when my energy is feeling really scattered, or when I'm feeling really unmotivated and having a hard time getting myself to the studio or to my instruments, starting off with something like this where I'm just making noise and Alright, so now we're going to go ahead and make video today. So the app that I use to do this is an app called Acapella. It's like a free multi-track audio recording app that also includes video. So you may have seen some folks using this to make videos of like themselves singing a song while they harmonize with themselves. That's definitely one thing you can do with it, but I figured you could also have some fun with this even if you are a percussionist like me. So I'm going to use 7 different sounds today, so I picked a layout that has 7 different boxes on it, although there's lots of different layouts. And I'm going to go ahead and start with this bottom left corner, although it really doesn't matter, I guess. Cool. And so I think today I'm kind of feeling in the mood to play with a specific tempo. So I'm going to click the tempo button, and maybe I'll click it. There we go. Cool. And it's set at 96. That was a good year. Let's go with 96 for today. Alright, so let's start this off with a little bit of kick drum. So I've got my phone down here on the floor, I've got my bass here, and we're just going to hit play and record something. I haven't really planned this out yet, so we're just going to take a very improvisational approach today. Here we go. So the next instrument I want to add to this is a brake drum. And a brake drum is literally a drum out of the brakes of a car. So it's a great example of a junk instrument. And it's got such a great resonance and a great attack. It's honestly like one of my favorite percussion instruments ever. Like I just find myself really drawn to these kind of junky metal sounds, especially when you combine them with drums or you use them in ways that are really delicate or pretty. So let's go ahead and add some of that. Now what I've done with the bass drum recording is I turned it all the way down, so I won't be able to hear the bass drum thing that I just played. I'm only going to be able to hear the metronome that's clicking off that tempo. And the idea behind that is just to see if I play something on the brake drum and I play something against what I already played on the bass drum, later we'll go back and listen to it and see if those things line up in ways that are maybe different or interesting, or maybe just a total hot mess. I don't know, we'll see. So let's go ahead and record some brake drum. The next track we're going to record is this wonderful little round device you see in front of you. This is one of probably my favorite percussion finds of all time. This is a bunt cake pan. I bought it for $1 at a yard sale, but listen to this. Yeah, it sounds like some kind of crazy church bell or something. So let's go ahead and add some of that on there. Just like with the previous two tracks, I turned them both down so that I'm actually not hearing what I recorded before, and I'm just going to add something to this, so we'll see what it sounds like later. All right, so this is a percussion video, and we had a bass drum, so we should probably have a snare drum. When I'm picking out instruments to do things like this with, I like to think about it almost like I'm cooking. And my students will laugh at me right now because they know I always make food analogies, but it makes sense with music too. So we've got kind of a low, tubby bass drum. We've got the high, almost chirpy sound of the break drum. We've got the bunt pan, which is very resonant, and so we're going to add the snare drum, which is a little bit crunchy and a lot higher, but I'm also going to add some extra crunch with this thing, which is called a ching ring, and it's like a metal ring with some tambourine jingles on it. So that's going to make the snare drum go from that to that. It's a little more muted and a little bit more of that crunch. Cool, so here's another favorite of my percussion instruments. These are some old coffee cans. So again, these are another favorite thing of mine. I like a lot of junky sounding instruments, like I said before, and what's cool about these is that even though they're all the same size, they each get a little bit of a different pitch, so it can kind of make some melodic, almost melodic kinds of things, quasi-melodic, I guess you could say. So let's add a little bit of coffee cans. So next up, I have the key chimes. These are some wind chimes made in Bloomington, Indiana, and literally they're just keys that haven't been cut yet. So they have a really delicate kind of tinkling sound that I like in the way that it can balance out the heavier drums and the junky metal sounds. So let's go ahead and add this. This is a washing machine drum that, with the help of my wonderful friend Coco Loop, we literally extracted from her old washing machine. And it's got a really incredible sound. It's like one solid piece of metal. So if I pick it up, it's very resonant. It's got a lot of side sounds, and the post in the middle is really cool. So let's go ahead and add some of that to our recording. So once I've got all of the different instruments recorded, you can see them all in here, I can go back and mix the audio levels, because like I said before, I turned all of them down as I was recording, so as I was playing each thing, I wasn't listening to anything else I had already recorded. So I can go back and I can change the levels so that they're all loud enough to be heard, and I can mix them and make them louder or softer or whatever it is that I want to do, just like I might mix just an audio recording. So we'll check it all out together. So after I make a recording like that, I always go back and listen to it just like we just did. So for that particular recording, I really like how noisy it is, which is, I would have expected that given all the different metal junky sounds. But I like the chaos of it. I like the noisiness and the junkiness of it. But I noticed that there's also parts where things line up. So there's a part where I heard like the kick drum and the snare drum kind of have some neat interplay together, or the snare drum and the cans did some stuff where they shared a figure kind of back and forth. So once something like that is done, there's a lot of different directions I might take with that. I might go through and pull out some of my favorite parts and turn those into a piece of their own, especially when I find those things that are kind of surprising or different than things I might have thought up on my own, but they're just in there, so I might use this for something else. As I'm going through the motions of doing that, I might come across another idea that I like better. So maybe as I'm playing the break drum, something pops in my mind of like, oh, I should try to play the break drum like this, or play it with a hi-hat or something. And then I'll go back and try that as a different thing. Maybe sometimes I just needed to go through the motions of doing a piece of music and build up that momentum. So now that I've got all my equipment set up, I'm up and I've got my recording going, then it's easier for me to keep going with it. So sometimes it's just something to get started. And sometimes I'll even just leave it as it is and let it kind of exist how it is. So like sometimes I find it really helpful to just let go of some of that preciousness of feeling like every note has to be just as it is, but to kind of embrace the chaos of the outcome just for the sheer pleasure of like making something. And so I find that like at times like this, especially now when there's so much going on in the world, when a lot of artists are making art that's really political, and I feel like I want to be commenting on the times and saying something and making that statement, I get really stuck in feeling like everything has to be perfect, or everything has to be this really perfect, strong statement that is sometimes hard to do with really abstract percussion. So sometimes I find that just letting my hands take over lets some of that pressure go, and then when that pressure is gone, I can make the things that I really want to make because I'm not overthinking it. And sometimes the things that I make by just letting my hands take the lead end up saying exactly what I wanted to say in the first place. They just kind of take a different route to get there.
Hi. I guess you guys all can see me now. This is really weird. So we have some time for questions if anyone has questions. Hopefully you all can hear me, right? Does anybody have any questions? No? Cool. Yes, thank you for the wonderful question, Fluffy Cat Attack. Yeah, I really do. I really like doing the stop motion. I have been a big fan of stop motion since I was a tiny child, and yeah, it's super fun. So yes, I have some ideas in the pipeline of what I want to do with that. But yeah, I feel like the music that I make and the stop motion stuff lend themselves to each other pretty well. So I want to keep doing that for sure. Yes. And then I see a question from Chip. It says, how did you start? How did I start like playing percussion? How did I start my morning? How did I start making weird videos? I'll just start with something. And if you want to specify, feel free in the chat bar. I started playing percussion when I was like, oh yeah, cool. I started when I was like 10. I started playing in the school band, just in the 5th grade. You know, all the teachers were like, oh, well, you get good grades, you should do something musical. And the drums kind of appealed to me for a lot of reasons. My mom actually played the drums when she was in elementary school, because it was the only, like a pair of drumsticks was the instrument that her parents could afford at the time. And so my mom had played drums and I wanted to play drums too. And yeah, so I started doing that. And I played all through school. I did like all the different bands, and then yeah, here I am. Hopefully that answers your question adequately. Have I used my videos in other works? Mostly I've just been putting videos on Instagram at this point, but I would really like to start doing more with that. I don't think that I'm a strong video maker by any means, but it's really kind of fun to do. And I think now that I've done this and seen how possible it is, I am really interested in doing more with it. And like specifically right now, one thing I want to do is make some recordings of some other pieces that have maybe some stop motion specifically written for those pieces, and do some video that way. So the answer to that question is not yet, but I'm hoping to. And then Fluffy Cat, your question. What do your students think about your music making and videos? I don't know. I think it's something that I often keep sort of separate from each other. Like I like to make music and share that with my students, but I think also, I don't know. I think usually when I'm at school, the focus is on the music that the students are making, and this to me feels like something that is kind of just for me. But yeah. And then Sharon Counterfeit Madison has asked, how has your education influenced your current artistic practice? Ooh, that's a whole video right there, Sharon. So I went to Ohio State for percussion. I graduated 15 years ago with my master's in percussion, which is a very long time ago. And yeah, I mean, I think that my education there gave me a really good overview of all the instruments. It gave me a lot of, just a lot of different tools for playing percussion. It gave me a lot of different ways of thinking about different instruments, exposure to a lot of different kinds of percussion music. And so I think it filled up my toolbox. Yeah, it filled up my toolbox. And then Ace and Sharon have both asked if I would ever want to score a film. Yes, that would be really fun. I don't know that I have anything more to say about that, but yes, I would. That would be fun. I also would really like to score video games. So if anybody is out there that needs a score for your video game and you want it to sound like garbage percussion or vibraphone, hit me up. Cool. Thanks, Chip. That's very nice of you to say. Does anyone else have any questions? This is super weird. Usually I'm standing in front of like a bunch of people who are being quiet and I feel awkward, but now I'm standing there feeling awkward in front of a computer. Cool. Yes, that would be a fun collab. Hopefully someday we'll all be able to be in rooms together and we can all collaborate, or that would be cool. Ace would like to know how I got so cool. You know, I think I was just born that way, honestly. So I got it from my parents. Yeah, it's genetic. Cool. Well, if no one else has any other questions, I guess this is how we wrap things up. Wrap it up? Okay. Oh, cool. And then one more question really quick. Dorian wants to know, what self-imposed limitation most surprised me in the end result? I would say, that's a good question. I would have to think about that hard. And I am going to first say, I think having to do it every day really surprised me because it made me have to think about new things. So I think that part of the video got cut off where I talked about kind of the importance of doing like the daily practice. But I think like doing it every single day, when I got to the point where I ran out of ideas, like after a week or so, and I had kind of gone through my typical go-tos, all of the extra stuff that I then found, like playing on a chair, playing on like, I think I used like my razor for shaving once, and that was pretty cool. Oh, and then one more question. Steve, what program were you using to capture the sound clips, photos, and then blend them together? I just did it all in iMovie. I took a bunch of photos on an actual camera and then just imported them into my computer. As far as recording the sound, I did a lot of it on GarageBand with a phone. And most of those music clips were kind of old, so I had made them a while ago. Yeah, most of them I did on my phone just with GarageBand, but or on my computer using GarageBand, or I sometimes use a program called Studio One, which is just another pretty easy DAW. Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we'll get wrapped up. I had my contact info on the end of the video. And yeah. Oh, wait, one more question from Cooper. Sorry. How does teaching influence your own practice and vice versa? Wow. That is a really good one. I think I think being able to see music through kind of a beginner's eyes really helped me to feel like I could do it. So the story I tell a lot is like my first year of teaching, I had a student come up to me after winter break, and they had just gotten a guitar for Christmas. And they were like, Mr. D, guess what? I just got this guitar and I've written like 10 songs already. And they played the songs for me, and they were, they were pretty rudimentary, like beginner kinds of stuff. But I just remember thinking, that I had been telling myself, oh, I can't compose music. I can't compose music. Like I didn't get a composition degree. I just did music ed and percussion. And then being like, wait a minute, this is a 14-year-old who has had a guitar for a week and had the confidence to write 10 different songs. And I'm telling myself that I can't. So I think that my students kind of, in a lot of ways, I get a lot of permission from them to approach things as a beginner or I guess that would be it. Yeah. That's a much bigger question. I could talk about that for a while. But I think it's time to wrap it up. Cool. So thank you guys all for coming so much, and thanks for watching this. If you want to check out any of my stuff, you can find me on Bandcamp and Instagram at Papercussion, like paper and percussion mixed together. Cool. Thanks so much for coming.